Family takes photo. Wife files for divorce after seeing this detail. This story will leave you astonished when you hear what happens next. Katie, wife and mother of two, could not have expected her day would end this way. It seemed like a normal day, a day when she wanted to celebrate all that she had achieved as a wife and a mother. But when this woman looked at this family photo, her world came crashing down. Katie and Bradley were husband and wife who had been married for 15 years. They were high school sweethearts who fell in love quickly and never dated anyone else. Although they went to different colleges, they stayed together through a difficult long-distance relationship. Now they were married with 2 children and were happier than ever before. Bradley was an independent contractor and would often travel away for work, while Katie was a structural engineer who worked in the city. The two were great parents to their children, Sean and Aubrey, who were 13 and 10 years old. They made sure that they were taken care of and brought them anything the kids around that age would need. When both parents were free, they would spend family time together. They all went on at least 2 family vacations a year, and they loved their kids, and their kids adored them. For their 15th wedding anniversary, Katie wanted to do something special that would involve the whole family. She wanted to take the family portrait that was done by a professional. She remembered that in all 15 years of marriage, even though they had pictures together as a family, it was all done through a flimsy digital camera. Katie had a vision. She wanted this one to be different, more special than all the other pictures that they had taken together. She ran the idea with Bradley, the husband, about taking a nice family picture with a professional photographer. Bradley thought the idea was great. They would frame it and hang it up in the living room. That was all Katie needed to get to work planning the whole thing. She searched online for the best photographer in the city, but she wasn't sure how good their work was when the reviews were mixed, and she wanted everything to be perfect. One day at the grocery store, while she was doing some shopping for the week, she ran into an old friend. The two got to talking, and Katie revealed her wedding anniversary plan, but confided in her friend that she was having a hard time finding a trustworthy photographer. The friend smiled assuredly. She told Katie that her cousin was a professional photographer who could take their pictures. Katie eagerly took the contact details from her friend. Back at home, she told her husband what had happened at the store. She explained who she had run into and how her old friend had given her a photographer's phone number. The husband looked a little concerned. He asked how she could trust that this photographer was good enough. He said that he wanted the pictures to be perfect and didn't just want anyone taking their photos. But Katie reassured him that the photographer was good. Bradley was still unsure. "What's the name of the friend that you ran into?" he said as he walked past her to the kitchen. Katie looked at her husband. "I feel terrible for saying this, but I can't remember her name. Oh goodness, what a forgetful brain," she replied. The day went on without a hitch, and Katie contacted the photographer, as her old friend had recommended. She still could not remember her friend's name, but was pleasantly surprised when the voice on the other end agreed to meet for an initial consultation. The photographer arranged to meet with Katie and her family on a Saturday when they were both free, so they could discuss photo shoot ideas, pricing, and the rest of it. However, Bradley would not be in town that weekend as he had a job that required him to be out of town for a few days. Katie needed to get the details of the photography sorted out, so she decided to meet the photographer alone. They met at a cafe close by, and the photographer brought out samples of the work that had been done. Katie gasped at the quality of the work. She said there and then that she wanted to go ahead with this photographer to take their pictures. The two discussed pricing and came to an agreement. The day of the family portraits came, and Katie was very excited. She checked her children's outfits once again to make sure nothing was out of place or stained. Her daughter's hair was curled and pinned back, and her son's shirt was crease-free. Katie looked in the mirror admiring her makeup. She had done a pretty good job, and she looked good. Bradley came behind her and kissed her on her cheek. He looked good too. The setup was in the back garden next to a big tree. It was a fall season, and there were leaves and beautiful mixtures of red and gold and yellow. Katie thought this would add an even more beautiful tone to the pictures. The weather was cool with a nice breeze, and the whole family was outside chatting and waiting for the photographer to show up. Bradley was playing with his daughter as he threw her in the air and caught her. Katie yelled at them to stop so that the daughter's hair would not be ruined, but the two just laughed. Just then the doorbell rang. It was a photographer. "I'll get it," Katie said, moving to the door. Meanwhile, back in the garden, Bradley was still chasing the kids around, trying to make them laugh as he always did. All of a sudden, he looked up and froze. His palms became sweaty and the smile he once had on his face faded away. Katie and the photographer walked back to the rest of the family, ready for the picture. Bradley suddenly became uncomfortable and didn't know how to pose for the picture. He stood awkwardly and was told several times by the photographer to relax. Katie noticed this and asked him if he was okay. Bradley barely nodded in response. Katie never thought that her husband was the type to get shy and nervous in front of a camera, but he did. For an hour, Bradley was so uncomfortable while the photographer snapped away. Even though it was a cool October day, Bradley had sweat stains on his shirt. When the photographer asked for pictures of the married couple alone, the poor husband moved towards his wife so stiffly it looked robotic. Katie kept glancing at her husband, concerned about his behavior. She had to keep reminding him to relax and to smile. For the final picture, it was the whole family once again, and the photographer directed the husband and wife to stand next to each other, and the children should be on either side. The daughter stood next to her dad and the son next to his mother, and the picture was taken. Once the photographer announced that he was done, Bradley could not run out of there fast enough. He went straight upstairs and took off the clothes he was wearing. Katie apologized to the photographer for her husband's behavior, explaining that her husband was not used to having his photo taken. They discussed the price and the photographer told Katie how long it would take to edit and develop the photos, and that the digital copies as well as the printed copies would be sent to her. The woman was very happy and thanked the photographer once again. Back in the house, the kids had gone back to playing. They hadn't noticed there was something brewing in their home, but Katie knew something was wrong. She went upstairs to talk to her husband. She needed to understand what his behavior was all about. But when she tried to talk to him, he shut the conversation down. He said he didn't want to talk about it and he didn't want to have his photo taken again. Katie concluded that her husband must have had some kind of phobia or a particular distaste for having his photo taken. Perhaps he was camera shy or self-conscious. Either way, Katie was still worried about her husband. He had never been like this before, and she had taken his picture with her own camera several times. Perhaps he was uncomfortable because it was a stranger taking the pictures. The pictures took a couple of weeks to arrive in the mail, and in that time, Bradley had become a different man. He was more reserved than before. He no longer spent so much time with his kids and spent even less time with his wife. He always kept to himself and was working much later than normal. Katie noticed all these changes, and when she tried to talk to her husband about it, he would make up an excuse and try to change the subject. There was something going on, but Katie could not place a finger on it. When the photographs arrived in the mail, the excited woman could not think of anything else but to open this parcel. When she got home, the first thing she did was tear open the cardboard to reveal the printed pictures. They were beautiful. She looked at how the contrast of the colored leaves appeared on the white dresses and the shirts of her family, and the incredible pictures. They were just stunning. Despite her husband's awkward poses, he seemed to be smiling in all of the pictures. As Katie shuffled through the large prints on the table, her eye caught something in one of the pictures. Just as she had held the photo closer to her eye, something clicked in her brain. Everything began to make perfect sense. Her face turned from happy, excited smile to a dark grimace. She felt her entire world crumble just as this one picture in her hands. With shaking hands, she set the picture down. This explained everything, why her husband had been extremely uncomfortable during the photo shoot, also explained why he had been acting so strange the past few weeks. Katie's stomach twisted into a knot and she felt like she could not breathe. As she stared at the pictures in front of her, what was supposed to be a happy moment that was captured now felt like something she could no longer look at. She packed all the pictures away and put them back into the box. For the rest of the day, Katie tried distracting herself while she waited for her husband to come home. But she couldn't do much of anything. She was thankful that she had the house to herself as the kids were staying at their cousin's house for the weekend. She didn't need the children coming home and witnessing what was about to happen. By that evening, Bradley walked into the house. He took off his shoes and jacket and made his way into the kitchen to grab a drink. He stopped in his tracks when he saw his wife sitting at the table, with large pictures sprawled around her. He looked her in the eye, and without saying a word, he knew that she knew. She was a smart woman and would eventually have figured it out. He walked cautiously over to his wife, who hadn't looked up at him yet. Before he opened his mouth to speak, she held up her hand to shut him up. Her finger pointed to the biggest print on the table. It was the last family photo the photographer took. It had Katie and Bradley smiling happily at the camera with their children on either side of them. Katie pointed at the detail that she had noticed, that turned her world upside down. From the picture, she could see that her daughter was posed next to Bradley. She gripped his arm and hand, displaying his fingers. On his finger was what made Katie's stomach turn. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring that he usually wore. Instead, it was a silver ring that she didn't really recognize. I saw this ring and I thought, that's not our wedding ring. Ours is gold. This is silver. I remember I found this ring one day in your trouser pocket when I was doing the laundry. Do you remember what you told me? Katie finally said to Bradley, tears filling her eyes. I can explain, Bradley said. His voice was full of pain. Katie did not allow him to finish a sentence. She continued, you told me that this was a silly ring your friend gave you in college. You said it meant nothing. I should have asked more questions then. I thought nothing of it. Even when you were acting strange at the photo shoot, I didn't think too much then, but I remember when you shook the photographer's hand, I saw this exact ring. It's not a coincidence, is it? And just like that, everything Bradley and Katie had built, the family they had, the love that they shared, it began to disappear. Bradley sighed heavily. He had been holding on to the secret all his life. There was no more room to hide. He had to come clean. He admitted everything. The ring was not a silly ring. It was a promise ring that he had custom made. He knew the photographer from college and they had dated each other secretly. Katie could not believe this. She had also been dating Bradley during this time. She felt so angry. The worst part was that the photographer was a man. So you mean you're... Katie couldn't even say it. Yes, I'm gay, Bradley admitted. Katie's world was spinning out of control. It felt like everything they shared was a lie. She had only ever been with him since high school. Meanwhile, he had cheated, and he probably wasn't even sexually attracted to her, but had married her and had kids with her. She felt used. She told him how she felt. She told him that she felt used to cover up this part of him. Bradley couldn't say much. He had no excuse for what he had done. Keeping the secret from her all of these years, pretending to be something he wasn't, because he was afraid of judgment. Katie asked him if he had continued seeing the photographer once they were married, and Bradley regrettably admitted that he had seen the man a few years into their marriage, but stopped as soon as Katie was pregnant with their first son. Bradley kept apologizing, and he assured Katie that he loved his children very much and loved the life that they had built together. But do you love me? Katie asked, tears filling her eyes. My family means the world to me, Bradley replied, and that was all Katie needed to hear. He didn't love her. He never did. Her heart felt like it had been broken into a million pieces. Everything that they had shared had been a lie. Katie stood up from the kitchen table and walked silently to the bed, leaving Bradley alone, surrounded by the pictures that had caused this pain. Katie didn't hate her husband for who he chose to love. She believed love was love and people should be allowed to love whoever they wanted. In some ways, she felt pity for her husband for not being able to come out as a gay man. She couldn't understand what that must have felt like to have to hide who you really are, to pretend and to lie. But then again, he lied to her. He pretended with her and he used her to cover up his secret, and he never even told her the truth, and she had to wait 15 years to find out. This was something she didn't think she could live with. The next day, Katie informed Bradley that she intended to file for divorce. She could no longer stay married to him. Bradley tried to beg and plead that they could work it out, but Katie was adamant. She would always love her husband, and she knew that he was a great father to their children, but she could not be with someone who did not love her and lied to her this way. Bradley finally accepted his fate and that this was happening, and there was nothing that he could do to change her mind.